Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of Into the Stands. I'm Colin here with Chris and Robbie, and after dust has mostly settled in this MLB season, we finally have our World Series. And before I hand it off to these other guys, I just want to basically say this is perhaps one of the most unprecedented matchups I think I've ever seen in the championship series for any sport. Coming out of the American League, we have the Texas Rangers, and then coming out of the National League is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Two teams who are just a couple years removed from having 100 lost seasons. Incredible turnarounds for both teams. I think it's sure to be a good World Series. Chris, you started off. What are you looking forward to during this World Series?
Wow. All right. So yeah, I think I'll start with the Texas Rangers because, you know, they both teams they did it they did it the right way. Right. They have the right people running their organizations. They got the right people. Both did it in completely different ways though, right? The Texas Rangers did it the sexy way, as I like to say, right? They went out, they spent the big money. They spent, I believe it had to have been close to half $500,000 or have $1 billion rather on the two free agents alone of Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. Right? They obviously didn't stop there. They got signed Jacob deGrom for this year. They signed Nathan Eovaldi. They signed John Gray a year ago. They they traded for Max Scherzer at the deadline, traded for Aroldis Chapman. This team, or not to mention, right? They're spending a lot of money on Bruce Bochy, the manager. This team put a lot of money into this team for this year, right? And they were a good team this year, right? They were in first place in the American League West. It looked like we were going to have a new champion. Of course, it came down to the final day, and they fall short to the Houston Astros in the division, right? But of course, as we know, a few weeks later, they'd find their way into the championship series, taking on the Astros, where they'd win in 7 games. Now, the first thing I want to say about these Texas Rangers is don't get it twisted, right? They're not just a team. They didn't just build through free agency. This team did a phenomenal job building around their core, right? Their core may consist of Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, two guys they acquired through free agency. But look all around this team elsewhere. This team made smart trade after smart trade. We'll start with the catchers. Jonah Heim and Mitch Garver acquired through trades. I think Jonah Heim was in the trade for Elvis Andrus, a guy who's not playing baseball right now. Great Texas Ranger, longtime Texas Ranger, but he was getting older, and they turned him into a future all-star catcher in Jonah Heim. Mitch Garver, who's been amazing this postseason, was traded from the Twins, acquired from the Twins for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, which we would know 24 hours later. We know what ends up happening with IKF. IKF, look, he wasn't going to have a future in Texas. They turned him into a future great catcher or great catcher in Minnesota, but a good offensive catcher for the Texas Rangers in their postseason run this year. First base Nathaniel Lowe, right? A guy, Colin really like from MLB The Show. I mean, he was a guy. He's a phenomenal hitter, straight, a nice little hitter that they added from the Tampa Bay Rays. One of the few trades that you could say the Tampa Bay Rays didn't actually win, right? The Texas Rangers, looking back on it, actually won that trade, getting Nathaniel Lowe. Leody Taveras, Evan Carter, Josh Young, guys they developed through drafts and minor league free agency. Oh yeah, of course, Adolis Garcia, the ALCS MVP, a guy they claimed off waivers from the St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, this team, just great trade after great trade, great acquisitions of certain players. You thought the bullpen was going to be a problem. It seemed like it may have been, but the offense helps them out. This team, look, they did it the right way. I heard, I actually saw a clip from Matthew McConaughey, the famous actor, who was saying how, all right, these Texas guys. Someone asked him who you're rooting for, the Astros or the Rangers, and he said, loves both teams from Texas, but he's rooting for more for the Rangers because they do a lot of work for charity and his charitable organizations. So this is a team. This is an organization that's done it the right way. Great people. Even the pitchers, Nathan Eovaldi, a guy who's gone through 2 Tommy Johns and a big game pitcher. Jordan Montgomery, a guy who went through a Tommy John with the Yankees. Andrew Heaney trying to find a home, right? It's really maybe it's a group of guys. It's not the greatest group of guys of all time, but it's a lot of guys who have been through a lot of injuries and are trying to find their way back. And there's a lot of guys on this Texas Rangers team that I'm rooting for to win a championship, win a ring.
When you look at this matchup head to head, if you told me at the beginning of the MLB playoffs that this is our matchup, I would ask if you are mentally okay. And here we are, a couple weeks later, with the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers. I'm going to start with the Diamondbacks because
I'd like to also.
you forgot to mention the Diamondbacks.
You got it, but bring them up. But there's a lot to talk about this Diamondbacks team. They oh my god.
I mean, I'm going to start with some of my favorite players on this team. They have a lot. I thought they were a year away from being even remotely close to this point. They had their young star in Corbin Carroll. They have Gabriel Moreno behind the dish, Christian Walker. Their rotation featuring Zach Gallen, who I think is going to be a future stud for them. They have Merrill Kelly, who pitched a great game a couple of days ago. And I had questions about both of these teams, the bullpen wise. But I remember on my podcast personally talking about this move, and I didn't hype it up enough, which was Paul Sewald from the Mariners to the Diamondbacks.
Amazing.
When I heard about this move on deadline day, I was like, what? Their only move was Paul Sewald, the former Met who used to blow games? It was so confusing. And then he goes out and has a phenomenal second half. A second half you could only dream of as a reliever to help the Diamondbacks. They are a young team, a semi-inexperienced team, I feel like, a team that will need more pieces to get back here one day. But I think this team is, I would want to compare it to the Nationals from a couple of years ago when they made the World Series. But
no,
it's a tough comparison because they don't have their true multi big time starters.
Right.
They're just, I don't know. That was my only comparison I could even think of. But the way the Diamondbacks play baseball, the young squad, they took down the Phillies, which put a smile on my face a little bit because, listen, the Phillies are a great team, but I didn't want an NL East team back in the World Series. So that made me feel a little bit better about the Mets being terrible. But, I mean, then going to the Texas Rangers, Adolis Garcia is an incredible story. He actually, I believe a couple of years ago, got waived by the Rangers, and then no one picked him up, so he got outrighted and came back, and now is on fire. So Adolis Garcia is an incredible story, and they have this whole very solid team. Do you know there's one piece missing from them on the injury report? A former New York Met as well, in Jacob deGrom. Imagine this team next year with Jacob deGrom in the rotation. They're winning 100 games. I'm just saying now, if they bring back most of these pieces, they're winning 100 games next year. DeGrom, Scherzer, hopefully more consistent Max Scherzer. You have other solid starter, Nathan Eovaldi, who I think has been fantastic for them over the course of the season. They are a fun team to watch out for in the future. And right now in the World Series, we'll go to our picks in a moment, but Colin, we'll head to your thoughts on this match.
Another storyline I want to talk about regarding this World Series is the fact that both of these teams had pretty rough second halves, right? Obviously these two teams had a lot of hype going into the All-Star break. I remember, obviously a lot of Rangers were named to the All-Star game. Corbin Carroll got named to the All-Star game as well for a fantastic season that he's had in his rookie year. But after the All-Star break, the Texas Rangers had a record of 38-33, while the Arizona Diamondbacks had a record of 32-39. And if you go back a couple weeks on this show, we were talking about whether or not these two teams would even make the playoffs. So to go all the way from that to end up basically defrauding the best teams in baseball to get to this point, I mean, I said it before, it truly is one of the most unprecedented championship matchups I can ever remember. I remember even in the NBA this season, people were talking about the Nuggets and Heat, how that was such an unexpected matchup. But I don't even know if I can think of anything that compares to this. I mean, can you guys? I mean, it's having the Rangers and the Diamondbacks in the World Series.
Recent memory. I don't know. I think what's funny is the Rangers almost seem like everyone's talking about the Rangers, but the Diamondbacks make the Rangers seem like the team that won 100 games and waltzed to the final, to the championship. Like they have a really good lineup. I cannot wrap my head around this Arizona.
I mean,
Diamondbacks.
it's put it in perspective a little bit. The Arizona Diamondbacks won 84 games, and here they are in the World Series. They only won 2 more games than the Yankees, and we talk so much about how that season was a disaster, and all the fans were fed up. But think about that. They won 2 less games than the team that won the NL pennant. Right. I mean, it really just goes to show you how unpredictable the baseball postseason can be. But taking a look at that Texas lineup, Chris already brought up Nate Lowe. I kind of wanted to mention him and the guys in the bottom of that batting lineup. But I mean, I'm a big fan of Texas's batting lineup. I mean, you have Nate Lowe and Josh Young usually around the 7-8 range, at least in this postseason. Those are 2 guys who batted .260 during the regular season. So this is a very consistent lineup. We obviously saw Adolis Garcia's had a phenomenal ALCS, really took over in a lot of those games. But at least we'll go into the picks in a little bit. But I'm just looking at to see how if the Rangers offense can keep like a level of production that you had against Houston, because you saw a lot of times against Houston, well, the games kind of at least stay close for a portion. That Texas offense was really good in the playoffs, especially in that ALCS. They were able to put a lot of runs on the board. Really, I think a lot of people need to give that lineup a lot more credit. But when you look at Arizona, obviously a really fast team that moves around the base as well, plays good defense. I think this is going to be a very fun series because, for the past 7 years, we had either the Houston Astros or the Los Angeles Dodgers in the Fall Classic, getting some new blood in there. Either we're going to see a franchise win their first World Series in 22 years, or we'll see a franchise win its first ever. So regardless of who wins, I think I'll be happy for whoever wins this World Series.
The Arizona Diamondbacks, I want to touch a little on them, right? I think they deserve they deserve an entire show. They really, what they did is look, I'll say this right now. What I saw this year were two of the greatest, most improbable things I've ever seen on a baseball field. I saw Domingo Germán throw a perfect game. Or I didn't, I have a whole story about that. That's a story for another time, about that, how I fell asleep in the 8th inning during a Kyle Higashioka at bat.
You did?
Yeah, it was the whole thing. It was the summer. I had to wake up early the next morning, and Kyle Higashioka. I'm sorry, I can't blame you that when Kyle Higashioka was up at the plate in a 10-0 game against the Oakland A's, that I fall asleep. All right, and I wake up to see Domingo Germán throws a perfect game. Greatest thing I ever witnessed, or that occurred during a baseball game that I had watched. Until this, this is, listen, they still got to win it.
What was more improbable?
Domingo Germán throwing a perfect game, but because at least anything can happen in the playoffs. Definitely was not expecting a perfect game, but I'm not going to compare it to the Nationals because and they still right. The Diamondbacks still got to win it, but I don't think that would take anything away from what they did if they don't. The Nationals, look, they got there, they won their championship. I'm not going to say that anything is more impressive than that. That was really impressive because they had their backs against the wall so many times. Everyone doubted them. They were under 500 in the season. The only thing they had going for them was that 1-2-3 in the lineup and Juan Soto, or the 1-2-3 in the rotation: Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin, and then Soto. The Diamondbacks, the Corbin Carroll's phenomenal, right? He's going to get MVP votes. He's guaranteed to be the Rookie of the Year. He's going to get MVP votes. Going to be one of the greatest players in this generation in a few years. Unbelievable talent. But really, other than that, this is not a lineup that you'd think goes to the World Series, which I think is that much magical, that much more magical about this. Now, they didn't necessarily, they are the Answerbacks because of the NLCS, but they kind of cruised their way to the NLCS, right? They dominated the Brewers. They played very well against the Los Angeles Dodgers, who played very well against them. And when you look at it, right, you'd think, okay, Zach Gallen, one of the best pitchers in the National League, he's been awful in this postseason. He lost both games 1-5 of the NLCS. But to be more specific, when I say the greatest thing I ever saw on a baseball field was what the Diamondbacks did, I'm talking specifically about going back to Philly down 3-2 and winning those next two games. That, to me, maybe it just surpasses Domingo Germán's perfect game. That might be the greatest thing I ever saw, because this, and I think the story about this story is more about the Phillies. What happened genuinely? Listen, I have no hatred towards the Phillies. I have absolutely none. I kind of wanted to see. I was happy with whoever won this series. I just wanted Houston to get eliminated. But I wanted to see if we got a Phillies-Rangers series, that would have been amazing. The ratings would have been off the charts. I still love this series, but that series would have went off the charts. Phillies-Rangers with the amount of stars in these lineups. But this was like Phillies postseason. It was almost sickening how much people loved this Phillies team, and the Dancing on My Own and the A-OK and all these songs, right? The singing and the fans loving it, and the bank, right, being all crowded and everyone going nuts, and this is not where you want it to be, and beating the Braves and everything, and all this talk. Bryson Stott, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper. This was the Phillies postseason. This was the Phillies pennant to lose until they lost it, and it just for the Diamondbacks to overcome all that, for Torey Lovullo, the manager, who's been here forever, almost got fired, to say that he's going to start, right, he's going to hold his players accountable, and he's such a great manager, such a great guy, very nice, very good to his players, and he gets the best out of them. Unbelievable. And even I think you see that most in the bullpen with the guys like Sewald, Kevin Ginkel, Saul Frank, Ryan Thompson. This team is unbelievable what they have done, and I don't know. We'll wait and see what they do. we'll move on now, but they deserve every bit of credit for what they did. Do not in any way, shape, or form criticize the Diamondbacks because they just snuck into the postseason as the 6th seed. Please, just don't do that to yourself. What this team did is unbelievable. And I think I just cannot stress it enough. It's unbelievable.
I couldn't agree with you more. So we go from there to, I think, the time they've all been waiting for, the World Series picks. Go each one by one before we head into our next segment. So we'll start with Colin to my right. What are you expecting? Who you got, and in how many games?
Listen, this is just a tough series to predict because I feel both of these teams obviously overcome almost insurmountable odds to get to where they've been. But I've seen a lot of predictions online. We'll see what a lot of people think is going to happen. A lot of people feel this is going to be a 7-game series, and I think it's going to be a 7-game series as well. Listen, these are the two best teams in baseball right now, as the records. At least as they're playing the postseason, as proved. As I said, the Arizona Rangers lineup, and you also have guys in that starting rotation. Max Scherzer looking to see if he can kind of find a similar footing, go back to the Max Scherzer of old in this World Series. That's going to be a big thing to look out for. You're talking about Nathan Eovaldi, obviously being a big game pitcher. He's really stepped up this postseason. And former Yankee castaways, Jordan Montgomery and Andrew Heaney, two guys who have put in pretty good innings for this team in this postseason. And, obviously you can't count out the Arizona Diamondbacks, especially with everything you said about them, with how they've been able to get to this point. But I'm going to go with the Texas Rangers to win in 7. And I think I can see this going either way. I can see Arizona taking this just as easily, but I just feel like the Rangers team is more built to win this World Series. I feel they have obviously more talent, obviously with guys like Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia in that lineup. I think that they're going to have a great series, but I'm going to go with Nathan Eovaldi. He's going to be a World Series MVP. I think he's going to step up again. I can see him pitching into Game 7, having a huge game there. I think that he's going to be the guy that shuts down this Arizona lineup. But once again, I think this is going to be a very fun series, a very tight series. And I think that Houston wins in a classic. Texas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I just want to say, first of all, listen, I've doubted this Diamondbacks team more than anyone. I want to be the first to say that. I did not think they were going to be, most people saw them as a sneaky team. Okay, I saw the youth, I liked it, but I did not see them going anywhere close to the postseason. I thought they might have finished under 500 heading into the season. When they got hot, right, as soon as they got cold and they lost the lead in the division, I thought, this is it, it's over. Cubs are going to get that spot, right? Which, by the way, real quick side note, the Cubs actually, I think, would have had the same route to the World Series as the Diamondbacks had. So,
You should have just said the Diamondbacks.
You should have.
I'm not taking credit, but, there's that. But the Diamondbacks, right, I've doubted them time and time again. I wrote them off as soon as they headed into Philadelphia in Game 1, as soon as they went down 2-0, and as soon as they went back to Philly down 3-2. I hate doing this to them. But I am going to choose the Rangers to win this series. I think it's going to go the distance. I think it's going to go 7 games. As you said, Colin, I just think this Rangers team, right, that I get the Diamondbacks are hot. And it's more, the Diamondbacks aren't just hot. I think that's why another point I want to make. They're not just hot. Because hot doesn't, you don't go back to Philly, win 2 gritty games in Philly by just being a hotter team. Philly was arguably the hottest team in the postseason and the hottest team in baseball the second half and the hotter team in this series. But so that's what's more special about the Diamondbacks winning this is they were able to overcome the heat, right? I guess just how well Philly was playing in Game 5. In Game 5, I mean, that was 2 games ago, and still go back to Philly and win those 2 games. I just think the Rangers I just think this is their time. They've been knocking on the door of winning a championship for a while, and they have the guys. They have guys with postseason pedigrees. This is their window. They've put all the chips into this year. I think they'll be good next year, but I think this is their chance, and I think Texas is going to win this. I am also going to pick a pitcher to win World Series MVP. I'm going to go with Jordan Montgomery.
I like that pick, So thank goodness. I did not pick the Texas Rangers for this. Yeah. This pick I think I switched between, 20 times because I like both of these teams. But what really brought Arizona over the top in their last couple of games? It was their pitching and defense. I mean, Game 7, they allowed 2 runs, I think. It was they allowed 4 total runs in the last couple of games. But fun fact I found, I think there was a list of teams that beat the Brewers and just made the World Series.
That's a great.
There was a couple of them. Cardinals, I think, were in that list. Let me find it real quick.
I mean, not great for the Brewers. I like
not great for the Brewers, of course. So we had
it's just incredible.
But I'm going to go with
how
history repeating itself because I really am comparing this to something very similar to the Nationals. I'm saying Arizona in 7 games. Now, I love this matchup, but Arizona is a lot of players. You just don't know who they are. Like, let me just look at this bullpen real quick because I didn't know who any of these guys were until I did my prep for this morning. I mean, Brandon Pfaadt, is that how you say it?
Yeah, he's
2.7 ERA. What a stud. Merrill Kelly. Zach Gallen, I knew. I did not know he had a 5 ERA.
Yeah, he's
so
not.
I don't know where that's come from. But you have Ginkley mentioned, Paul Sewald, former Met, Ryan Thompson, another former Met, and Miguel Castro. They have it's a weird group. And it's a group that you can really piece together. They're 84 wins. They've had nothing to lose. The pressure is now on Texas. So I think it's going to be very similar to how the series went with the Astros. Not the Astros, the Phillies. I'm really mixing my series this year. So I'm going to say the Diamondbacks win in 7 games. And I'm going to go with an MVP that no one is expecting because he has gone very under the radar in the last week or so. And I was thinking Corbin Carroll. But I'm going to go with a dude who's hitting 358 in the playoffs. Give me Ketel Marte as my World Series MVP. He's been red hot. I was debating between him and Christian Walker because they both like to drive in runners. But this team's really fast. They like defense. And listen, what do you need in the World Series? Pitching and defense. And I think that they're really going to shut down the bats. I'm worried about Texas's bullpen. I said it last week. I'm going to say it again. I'm worried about them. But just one note on Texas. I think the real thing that really kickstarted that series win was the stuff with Brian Abreu just throwing at people when someone got hit by a pitch, then Adolis hits that absolute bomb and a half to take the lead. I mean, I think it was to take the lead or just to add more runs to the Rangers. Like that, the whole narrative, every team has some form of a narrative brew from this series is won. And I just feel like Arizona's going to have something that's going to carry them to a win. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Ketel Marte going absolutely nuts. Maybe Corbin Carroll does something. But I think with their youth emerging, Arizona, listen, if you told me Arizona a couple of years ago, because they used to be an absolute mess, just going half in, half out, not knowing where to commit to go all in or rebuild. And if you really think about it, it's kind of worked for them. I mean, because you go all in 1 year, you lose some of the pieces, but you start to see the youth come into play. Corbin Carroll, perfect example. Gabriel Moreno now as well. It's kind of worked. And it's annoying that it works because it's not supposed to work. If you're half in, half out, like glass full or glass half empty, you're not supposed to be here. You could argue that this spot was maybe made for the Padres because they were supposed to have, or the Mets. You're supposed to have this all these high-paying teams make the big dance, but not all those big teams have to throw money at everything that moves to pay to make it into the big dance. Yeah. So I think it's a phenomenal series. By the way, just quick note, I want your quick thoughts on this. Craig Counsell, I believe, is interviewing with the Mets. Do you think the Mets get him?
Yeah.
You do think that?
Yeah.
Listen, I would love it for
I mean, I know he loves Milwaukee. He's a great manager over there, but I don't know. I don't even know if it's about the money. I
just want to make the playoffs.
The opportunity, a new challenge to come to New York and win with the Mets. I'm going to say he does. I think they're going to make a good offer to him, and I think David Stearns is also going to persuade him to come over.
Any quick thoughts on this?
I mean, all I'll say is that Steve Cohen definitely has the money, so I'm sure that he'll throw him a big contract, and I can see him going to the Mets.
All right, so do you want to head to the hardwood or the gridiron?
Let's go to football.
Let's go to football. Perfect. So
obviously, the New York Giants are the one team in New York who played this week because the New York Jets are on their bye, and we had basically a must-win game against Washington. Listen, this is a game you had to win because if you fall to 1-6, it's not looking good for the rest of the season. Tyrod Taylor once again started at quarterback, and the offense looked great in the first half. This is the first time the Giants had seemingly an NFL level offense in the first half of a football game this season. They scored 14 points. We saw Tyrod have that big running catch throw to Saquon Barkley. They took to the end zone. Darren Waller got his first Giants touchdown as well. mean, Tyrod Taylor had about, I believe it was like 250 passing yards in the first half. I mean, really just lighting Washington on fire. And listen, Washington really had a rough go on offense. Sam Howell got sacked a lot. That Giants front, listen, I've been waiting to say Leonard Williams all season. Leonard Williams finally showed up, and it's great to see because the Giants are paying Leonard Williams a lot of money. And to see him finally able to apply pressure there, along with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, they were really, I mean, the Giants defense leading up to this game only had 5 sacks on the season. They got 6 against that Washington front. And I know Washington is one of the worst O-lines in the league, but listen, maybe that's the way to get that defense sparking. And listen, that defense under Wink Martindale, it really looked a lot like the defense we saw last year, making a lot of opportunistic big sacks, plays like that. But what concerns me the most about this win is that even regardless of all that, they still left maybe 13, maybe 17 points on the board. We saw Kayvon Thibodeau drop an easy pick 6. No matter what the circumstances, you have to make that play, return it back to the house. If you're going to get really, I remember they were saying on the broadcast too, listen, bad teams find ways to lose games. If you want to be able to turn the tide, especially when you play better competition than Washington, you have to make plays like that in order to win the ball game. So he has to catch that. We saw Saquon fumble near the end of the game in the red zone. Now, granted, that was only the second fumble of Saquon Barkley's career, so I don't expect that to happen a lot. But once again, you can make plays like that in big moments. We also saw Graham Gano miss about a 42-yard field goal. Once again, I don't expect that to happen a lot because Gano is one of the more reliable kickers in the NFL. But listen, the debate still rages on, at least for some Giants fans. Should Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones be the starting quarterback going forward? Obviously, I think that with the current O-line situation, I think that Tyrod Taylor works better under a worse O-line. But Dable made it very clear that Daniel Jones is a starter once he returns from the neck injury and gets ready to play. It was 14-7. Obviously, scoring 14 points is not going to win you a lot of games in the NFL going forward. But I think the offense could have definitely scored more points. I think that the second half, trying to get back on track, they need to carry over at least the momentum they had in that first half for sure. But I've had nothing bad to say about Tyrod Taylor, man. Listen, he's really done what he's had to do, especially for a 34-year-old quarterback being the backup. Listen, I think that Tyrod Taylor has had a pretty solid NFL career up until this point. Saw the stats about 60 touchdowns, 22 interceptions. He gets the job done. There's a reason why he was able to lead Buffalo to the playoffs back in 2017. That's because he's a pretty solid quarterback in this league. He hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities. You remember back when he was the starter to Justin Herbert, but he had that unfortunate instance with the Chargers medical staff, which is why Justin Herbert ultimately came in and never looked back. But game next week against the Jets, we'll talk about that separately. But like I was saying, though, I think that the worst part of the Giants schedule is past them. Obviously, you have to beat the Jets on Sunday to try to pick up that momentum, but you have games coming up against the Jets, the Raiders. Obviously, the Cowboys is going to be tough, but you play Washington again, you play the Patriots, the Packers, the Saints, all teams that have somewhat struggled, at least so far in this season. So the season's not over, but you really have to go back to the way you were playing last season. And also, once again, I like the way the offense has looked better over the past couple of weeks, but you have to go back to scoring points. You can't consistently win in the NFL, score averaging around 10 to 15 points. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, it was a gritty little win from the Giants. I mean, it's one of those things where they just needed it. They absolutely needed it. But is it one of those games? I don't know if it's one of those games you're walking out of there and feeling confident. I mean, just like what happened.
I love the way the defense played.
But of course. But I feel like then it's the same story that we've seen. It's just it finally translated to a win that we had to have, and there were also, as you mentioned, right, that dropped pick 6, and there were other plays too, opportunities to score or take advantage of Washington's horrendous O-line. I mean, you heard I was actually in the car listening to Bob Papa for a part of that game, and he mentioned how Washington's O-line is worse because they don't have the injuries that the Giants do.
Yeah,
and that I mean, Sam Howell, right, really had a tough day, but you still you'd like to see you definitely have to see a better opportunity, sorry, you definitely have to have a better performance and take advantage of your opportunities against a team like Washington, right? As we mentioned, the team that they usually beat at least once every year. So it's one of those things you're not exactly, overly excited, but it is something. It is something that positive that hang your hat on, right, for the first time in a long time. But we'll just take it week by week, and next week, right, is a huge game against the New York Jets, a game that'll be entertaining regardless of how it goes, regardless of the circumstances, right? That even though it's not this Giants going to the playoffs and Aaron Rodgers carrying the Jets to a playoff, spot as we thought it was going to be preseason or before the season, but it is still Jets versus Giants, and this game does have a lot of big implications.
Yeah, I mean, for the Giants' perspective, my big thing was the quick notes I just looked over for them. The way they were able to limit Washington on third down. That was
15.
1 for 15. I'm very impressed. The one part that I think the Jets will be able to capitalize on is how good did they look in the second half?
I mean, listen, they
not great because they didn't score.
The offense struggled. They still moved the ball, though. That's another point I want to get to as well. They were able to get Jalen Hyatt on 2 big bombs. Please, please, please keep throwing the ball to Jalen Hyatt. He needs to get more involved in this offense. He's a big time playmaker. But listen, like that drive right there where they threw the bomb to Hyatt, they should have at least gotten a field goal or a touchdown there. But like I said, just a very rare Saquon Barkley fumble. So it's not like the offense completely shut down. Obviously, they still weren't as good as they were in the first half. It just comes down to being better in the red zone. And that's just basically been the main struggle for this offense all year. It's just taking advantage of the opportunities that you're given.
I mean, 14-7, you'll take that win. But I was just looking at some of the injury reports ahead of Jets-Giants. And I'll just go give a couple of quick updates because I just got something today. So for the Jets, we'll go with them first because the Giants ones, I scrolled through. Some of the players on here were interesting, but it wasn't terrible. The Jets do have full practices today and yesterday from Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Brandon Eccles, and Jermaine Johnson apparently got injured, but he is expected to be good to go. Sauce Gardner is going to have, I believe, a concussion symptoms test tomorrow. I heard that was a rumor. I'm not 100% sure if that's confirmed. DJ Reed, I would assume, would be in the same situation. But the one, I was just thinking about this now, matchup-wise. So who would you, if you're the Jets, I think Jalen Hyatt would be guarded by Michael Carter. By the way, Michael Carter II is way faster than you think he is. But I think with the Jets scheming, the one thing that really haunts the Jets was the deep ball in week 1 and week 2. They haven't allowed a deep ball haven't allowed a deep play in forever. That's not on the ground, and they've adjusted their run defense very much, and it's worked very well. So I'm interested against that Giants offensive line that will be bringing back Andrew Thomas.
It's still up in the air.
It's still up in the air, but listen, the Jets reportedly will not have, as of right now, Joe Tippmann, who's looked very good. So I'm worried about the Giants pass rush a little bit, but what Zach Wilson, my guy wearing the jersey today, has been able to do, especially against the Eagles, in certain situations, was get the ball out much quicker. And he's been able to do that. I think that's the one thing that's haunted Daniel Jones, is getting the ball out quickly. And it's just
thankfully
simple
that's not going to be a problem
decision-making.
because Tyrod Taylor's going to be starting on Sunday.
That's the other thing. But I think it's just not overthinking the plays. Though the big thing with the Jets defense is when they've caused more than one turnover, I believe they've won every game other than Kansas City. So I'm not worried about the Jets defense. Offensively, I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to run the ball down their throat. And it's going to be, especially with how bad that O-line is and the way they were able just to run through Philadelphia. Granted, it wasn't an insane amount, but I think Breece Hall had 80 yards or something. You'll take that, especially in the Jets situation. But the big situation for me is going to be, what does the pass game look like for both teams? And I do think Saquon Barkley is not going to have the craziest game ever. Didn't he get injured? He had an injury?
He had a stainer on his arm, but he was limited in practice. But all expectations are he would still play on Sunday.
That makes sense. So, listen, hopefully for this game, we'll break it down a little bit more right now. The big worry for me is the health of DJ and Sauce. Even though I'm not that terrified of the Giants' pass game, not really. Because if you only put up 14 against Washington's inconsistent secondary, I don't know what to think. Because my prediction, I'll go into my game prediction in a bit. I just, early thoughts, I think this game's going to be way closer than a lot of people think it's going to be. I still think Gang Green are going to win, but I'll tell you why in a bit. But let's break down this game a little bit here. So Colin, we'll start with you. Giants, Jets, what are you expecting?
So the MetLife Invitational, happens once every 4 years for a lot of bragging rights in New York. The last time the Giants beat the Jets in a regular season game was 2011. And if you remember, that was the game.
2011?
Yes,
I
that was
didn't
that
remember
was the
that.
game where Victor Cruz had a 99-yard
Oh,
touchdown. He took it to the
yeah,
house, which
yeah.
basically knocked the Jets out of the playoffs and led the Giants onto their run where they captured their fourth Super Bowl title. I was 7 years old back then, so it's been a while since the Giants have beaten the Jets in a regular season game. And listen, this matchup does have a lot of significance. I remember Saquon Barkley, who actually grew up a Jets fan, being from Pennsylvania, said that his last game against the Jets back in 2019, which the Jets ended up winning. Back then, it was Sam Darnold versus Daniel Jones.
That was
Saquon
bad.
Barkley had 13 carries for only 1 yard, so I expect Saquon to be better this time around. Even though he had that stinger in that last game, but like you were saying, I expect a close game. I expect a low-scoring game because both the Giants and the Jets have struggled to put points on the board this season. But as you said, especially with Joe Tittman out, it's really going to come down to which O-line holds up better. And listen, the Giants O-line, they've been better over the past couple weeks. I think a big part of that has been Justin Pugh. I loved what he's been doing there, coming back to the Giants. But it's not like they're protecting Tyrod Taylor as much more better than they are Daniel Jones. It's just that Tyrod has better pocket awareness as to where he's able to get the ball out quicker. Obviously, we're going up against the Jets defensive line. That's going to be an issue. But I expect a low scoring game. Probably looking at like a 17-13 affair. It's going to be a really ugly game, really defensive game. I want the Giants to win this game, obviously. I'm not sure if they will. Obviously, the Jets, as we talked about at length, are the better team, the more talented team, at least on defense, and even their playmakers on offense. But listen, I can see this going either way. I think this is a 50-50 game. This is a very important game for both teams, though, like I said. Not often when we see these two teams do we see, kind of middle of the year where it's huge. They both have, I don't know if I'd say the Giants still have playoff aspirations, but you want to win this game to keep your season alive, especially with the schedule you have coming up. So, like I said, very defensive slugfest oriented type of game. I think it's going to be even a lot like how that game against Washington played out. We're going to see I don't know if I'll say 14-7, but definitely low scoring. But I think, like I said, it can go either way. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how these two New York teams face off after 4 years.
Yeah, it's I'm glad that at least, right, as you mentioned, that this game still has, some some magnitude to it, right? It is still gonna be heavily hyped up in the city. It's just it does stink that, of course, as I mentioned, right, what we thought this game was gonna be is not close to what it's gonna be, and in fact we are, yeah, as you mentioned, probably gonna get a very ugly affair, very low scoring. I think the Jets will win this game. They've proven that they can eke their way out of games against opponents that they should beat. They at least win the games that they should win. They look good, right, or they have looked good in the games that they have lost, right, against Kansas City, for example. Right, and having that big win against the Eagles as well. They've proven more to me and to everyone that they can win a game against a team that's struggling. The Giants, it's maybe this past Sunday, the game against the Cardinals, only 2 wins. Everything else has been, a game that either we definitely had no business winning and we didn't even come close to winning, or heartbreaking game like last Sunday against Buffalo where we have a chance and we can't capitalize. So for that reason, I just think the Giants are going to lose this game. I also am going to say it's very low scoring, right? I think it's going to be, like 17-7, I'm going to say.
I like that the low scoring idea. Last year, I believe, or like 2 years ago, we did see Zach Wilson against Tyrod Taylor, and it was a very low scoring matchup. Tyrod Taylor did nothing after the first drive. They scored I believe it's how it was. I can be correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Texans scored on their opening drive and then did nothing. Zach Wilson did nothing till the second half. But what I'm expecting is last year, the Jets had their statement win against the Green Bay Packers. It was one of the greatest games I've ever watched in my life. How did they follow that up? Struggling against the Denver Broncos. And I'm saying that game will be pretty much identical. Now, we are not seeing Zach Wilson. I believe it was, did he face Brett Ripien? I think it was Zach Wilson against Brett Ripien. We're not seeing that bad of a matchup. Zach Wilson returns to the picture, but he's facing Tyrod Taylor again. So Zach Wilson facing Tyrod Taylor, round 2. And I'm going to back the Jets, not because it's my team, but you guys said it well. I think the big question for me is, what does the interior of the defensive versus offensive line look like? And I think the big days are going to be your guys like a Quinnen Williams. I think Quinn Williams is going to run through that offensive line. But I you want a guy who could scramble? How about a guy who can run just as fast in Jermaine Johnson? I mean, he's been phenomenal out of nowhere. Bryce Huff, same way. You have those quicker defensive ends who I think are going to be able to contain Tyrod Taylor. And what they've really able to do against Jalen Hurts was put in QB spies, not letting him move very much out of the pocket, especially in the second half. So I'm expecting something similar. I'm going with a bigger scoreline, though. I'm going 20-7 because I think the Giants are going to score on their opening possession and then have like 100 total yards, but the Jets are going to have like a ton of turnovers. This is going to be very similar to the Denver game. My big days, who am I expecting a big day from? I mean, I want to say Garrett Wilson. I'm not going Garrett Wilson. Have the Giants struggled to guard the tight end at all?
Oh, well, in terms of guarding the tight end, I mean, we haven't really played too many high-level tight ends, at least up to this point.
All right, Tyler Conklin, today is your day, sir. You get a touchdown. Sure, why not? He's going to go for like 80 yards.
I am looking forward, though, to seeing Wilson versus Deontay Banks. I think that's going to be a fun matchup because Deontay Banks has done pretty well against top-flight receivers so far this season.
I mean, I think it's going to be the big headline for me, and this was the same with Denver, was the battle in the trenches. And I think it's going to be I'm really backing a big day from Breece Hall again, but I'm interested to see my big thing, especially on the defensive end, who is marking who if the corners are all healthy. I think Brandon Echols is going to play, which I'm not worried about that. The big thing I'm worried about was Sauce Gardner because I think he would be guarding Jalen Hyatt possibly. And then,
I mean, Jalen Hyatt didn't see the field enough to the point where they would do that.
I mean, who is your wide receiver too? Because they've really put Sauce on wide receivers too.
I mean, really, they just rotate between like a Darius Slayton or a Wan'Dale Robinson.
I think you see Wan'Dale would go up against who's shorter.
Wan'Dale,
and he's going up against DJ Reed. Have fun. No. DJ Reed though has been much better. He had a very bad game a couple weeks ago against Kansas City because he was getting torched against Kansas City, and then he really rebounded, especially in the second half. I think it's a real big thing.
Now,
here.
I'll ask you, how do you feel about the Jets guarding Darren Waller? Who would you say is going to guard Darren Waller?
Quincy Williams. I mean, you can put Quincy on him. They like throwing a million corners on the field. I actually think Sauce Gardner would go up against him because they like putting a million corners on the field. So I think you'd rotate then in the secondary with a hopefully healthy Michael Carter II, DJ Reed, and Brandon Echols. Listen, Brandon Echols, when he played, was been pretty good. I like the young guys. Tony Adams, I mean, Jordan Whitehead was actually good guarding a tight end last year. So I'm interested. I think Sauce would guard him just as like to battle the height and the physicality. So I would say Sauce, but don't like you could throw up a linebacker against him. They just like starting two linebackers. And I don't know why. I don't hate it because it's worked, but I think it would be Sauce Gardner. I think you're just going to need that taller secondary threat. And I really think Sauce Gardner, Brandon Echols, you can argue could be tall. I think he's like 5'11", but how tall is Darren Waller? 6'3"?
Out there, 6'5", more like.
Yeah. Sauce being 6'3", I think would go up against Darren Waller. It's a good question, though. I actually am very intrigued to see how that goes. But the Jets have been really able to limit the tight ends. Dallas Goedert, I think, had 1 catch or 0 catches or something like that. We were able to limit the tight ends in Buffalo. We were able to limit Kelsey had 7 catches, I think, but he only had like 50-something yards. So he wasn't like that big of a threat either. So the Jets have really been able to limit the tight ends. But I think I don't remember who guarded Travis Kelsey. Because I would put whoever guarded Travis Kelsey. Someone tell me who guarded Travis Kelsey when he played the Jets. Whoever that was, I'm putting him up against Darren Waller. But we'll head to the NBA next because that's what you guys have really requested to talk about. And we want to start with this. I think the bigger headline was the Celtics-Knicks game from last night. So we'll start with that.
I don't know if it was, but I mean, we can go ahead with that
because I think this was like the choke at the end for the Knicks. Because how bad they looked in the fourth, at the end of the fourth quarter. That's what I heard, at least. I did not watch this game.
I mean, they made it close at the end, and they can't. And look, I mean, heading into the season, it's one game. It's the Celtics. They're a tough matchup, of course. They did a lot to improve this offseason. And the Knicks, they brought in Dante DiVincenzo, a good piece, as I mentioned last week, but didn't do much else other than that because, I mean, there was probably not much else to do. And there are the rumors of, certain players out there, but this is the team they do have, and they played overall a pretty good game. Fell short at the end, and now they play against, I believe I forget who they play tomorrow. Do you ever know?
They play on Saturday against the Pelicans.
The Pelicans.
I wouldn't know this. I wouldn't know this, by the way.
So
actually, no, sorry. They play the Hawks tomorrow.
It's Hawks and
Pelicans.
Pelicans.
Right. That's who it was. Right, that's exactly who it was, and that's at the Garden.
No, it's in Atlanta.
Oh, okay. So it's whatever. And I believe that the Hawks. How did they do their first game? Do you know?
I saw that both Trey Young and DeJounte Murray really struggled shooting from the field.
That's the only thing I saw. Which I guess anything to hang your hat on. Heading into Atlanta, the home opener for them. But it's.
Oh yeah, I mean Atlanta lost to the Charlotte Hornets last night.
The Hornets.
Atlanta's a vibe though. I was down there. Those fans, I saw like a small thing with the fans there in Atlanta. They're insane. So I'm interested to see how much like they rock. What's their? I don't even remember their arena's called, to be honest with you.
State Farm.
State Farm. That's right. Because like I remember just a quick thing like in Atlanta, like Mercedes-Benz, State Farm, like everything's like right there. So I was just trying to remember, like that's not Mercedes-Benz. That's State Farm.
I think the Braves are out more.
Yes. Yeah. No, they're more by my hotel in Gwinnett County.
I don't know. What are you making the Knicks?
I mean, it was an interesting one. Kristaps Porzingis getting booed by the Knicks fans. What you would expect, and he responds by putting up a pretty solid game. The Celtics looked like the better team throughout. I mean, at one point, I remember when we I'll make this point as well. You two were watching the game in class. I was trying to do, we were all doing part of a project, and you guys were watching a little bit of the game in class. And I saw like the Knicks cut the lead down to 1. I saw them leading at one point when I was on my phone in my room. And then the Celtics, they're just a better team. Drew Holiday, I don't think had a very good game. I'm interested to see if he had like 7 points only at one point. But listen, Kristaps Porzingis and Jason Tatum looked solid to me. And just interested to see, like, can more of these players, if you need them to, step up for the Celtics. But any comments on that before we head to San Antonio?
That's why I said, like, at least on paper, this Celtics starting 5 with Derek White, Drew Holiday, Brown, Tatum, Porzingis. Yeah, White started last night. They might eventually move Horford into there. They're kind of going to rotate around there a little bit. But listen, this is a great starting lineup, and we saw Porzingis really do exactly what they brought him there to do. Listen, you gave up Robert Williams, and obviously Robert Williams is a great defensive presence, but obviously Porzingis brings a lot more to that team offensively. And we even saw it there against the Knicks last night, against his former team. I'm not too worried about the Knicks here because I still think this is a pretty good team. This is a team who I still expect will make the postseason. We even got 24 points off the bench from Emmanuel quickly, which is huge. Once again, we saw he was the 6th man of the year finalist last year. I think that with the Knicks, there's a lot of options they have here. I mean, they played 9 guys last night. Dante DiVincenzo in his first game couldn't get any points. I don't expect that to continue for very long. You have Isaiah Hartenstein doing a lot of dirty work. Josh Hart obviously didn't have a great game last night as well, but he's going to do a lot of work coming off that bench. I think the Knicks are going to be pretty good this year. I think especially starting off the season, being close with Boston, that's a good sign that you can obviously build off going forward.
Well, I think the bigger storyline was what happened in San Antonio.
I think absolutely. Now, listen, this is one of the most highly anticipated NBA debuts we can remember for a long time. You saw the atmosphere in San Antonio before the game. We saw flashing lights moving all around the stadium. When Victor Wembanyama got announced in the starting line, the stadium roared. Let me tell you, I've watched a lot of San Antonio Spurs games last year. None of them were sold out like how that game was sold out last night. The atmosphere was electric. And listen, the Spurs played a very good basketball game. Yeah. They were winning for most of this game up until the fourth quarter. And they're just a fun team to watch, man. A lot more fun than last year. You saw Keldon Johnson get off to a hot start. You saw Devin Vassell put in a lot of work. I saw a lot of people on Twitter now are starting to recognize Devin Vassell as being probably the best player on this team so far. He's getting a lot of work in from the mid-range spot. We saw Jeremy Sohan play point guard, which is pretty unexpected considering he had a lot of work at power forward last season. Now, I'll get into that a little bit later, but obviously, the big story of this game was Victor Wembanyama. He started off with 2 early free-pointers. It really looked like, at least at first when the game started, he was not going into the paint a lot, kind of settling around the free-point line, but he was still hitting them at a consistent rate. But the issue was he got in pretty bad foul trouble, had 5 fouls at one point going into the fourth quarter, and that's going to be a thing he has to adjust to because, listen, I've heard a lot about how the European game is more physical. Obviously, the NBA, they're more likely to call foul calls on contact, even little contact. So for Victor, he's going to need to get more usage, changing his defensive strategy. A lot of people are high on him being a defensive player in this league. A lot of people are saying he could be a defensive player of the year candidate, even already in his rookie season. And listen, he started off with a block, got 5 rebounds. But really, seeing him in that fourth quarter was special. We saw him at 19 years old in his first ever NBA game after playing overseas, take over that game in the fourth quarter. He hit a big three-pointer, got in there and won on the dunk, scoring 9 points in that fourth quarter. And they were winning that game with about 2 or 3 minutes to go. But this is where it became a problem, which is why I wanted to go back to Jeremy Sohan playing that point guard. I don't think Jeremy Sohan should be the point guard going down stretches of these games. I think you should go to a more experienced guy like Trey Jones. And Trey Jones had a good game as well. Listen, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. He was a starting point guard last season. I see no reason as to why he should be going forward. I like what Sohan brings to the table. He really has improved his shooting, especially from the free throw line. He was very well known for shooting one-handed free throws, which was odd at first, but listen, it worked pretty well for him. But I think Popovich kind of wants to go with a taller lineup, more defense oriented. But I just think, especially against the experienced team like the Dallas Mavericks, you need to have a more traditional point guard like Trey Jones going down a stretch of those games, because both Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sohan did not feed the ball to Wembanyama at the end of that game when he clearly had the hot hand. Now, I know this is the youngest team in the NBA, so obviously you're going to make mistakes like that. This is a young team. You're going to see how it goes forward for the rest of the season. But you have to, acknowledge the hot hand, get the ball in the hands of Victor Wembanyama. I mean, even Devin Vassell did not have the ball in his hands at the end of that game. He finished with 23 points. So going forward, I want to see Wembanyama and Devin Vassell close these games. I'm a big Keldon Johnson fan as well, but he kind of has a tendency to kind of have tunnel vision when he's driving to the rim sometimes. He's a good finisher, especially down low. But overall, that's a good first game for the Spurs. Now, I know Luka Doncic hit that dagger. Kyrie had a couple big plays near the end of that game. But the Dallas Mavericks are a good team. Listen, they had a pretty rough sled in last year, especially after getting Kyrie Irving. But I think the Spurs will be a fun team to watch this year. We saw really being competitive against one of the better teams in this league. I mean, listen, I don't know if we're going to contend for a play-in spot. I'm not sure. But all I can tell you is that the San Antonio Spurs, especially being a young, hungry team, they're going to compete with you on a night-in, night-out basis. This is going to be a tough out for some teams going forward.
Yeah, and I think not much else to say. Putting up 119 points in the first game is special, and if I don't know if will you see this every game? Probably not, but it's definitely exciting and definitely something to look forward to. I mean, Luka Doncic on the other side, of course, he's a stud. He's we all know that, and I don't know if he felt a little more pressure, with this up and coming NBA talent to try to prove that he's still there. Not that he needed to prove that. We all know Luka Doncic, but he's amazing. Of course, they added Kyrie this or last year, and he's here now. This for a full year. Right, he had a solid game, and they end up winning this game. But yeah, the Spurs, right? I remember watching this game as well as I was doing work, and looking back and seeing they're still in it. They're still winning the game, and they're balling, and looking forward to the season for the Spurs. They look like they're going to be a lot of fun. They play a game tomorrow night against the Rockets. I mean, could that be a game that they
a lot of young talent there in that game, the battle for Texas. One more thing I want to get into before we move over is that just 33 assists for this team, especially for a young team with a superstar like that for Victor Wembanyama. You would think that they'd be more selfish, but no, that's just the way Greg Popovich coaches this team, which is why, once again, it's great that Victor Wembanyama ended up in the situation, because Greg Popovich knows how to play an unselfish game. Obviously, we talked a lot about the beautiful game Spurs back in 2014, played an unselfish brand of basketball. I mean, in comparison, the Dallas Mavericks had 24 assists, so that's just what I'm excited for. We didn't see it a lot in the last 2 minutes, but the frequent ball movement is going to be really fun to see this season, especially for a lot of young, talented players.
Absolutely. I mean, real quick before we head into our Thursday night football pick, going through the first slates of games, so yesterday and Tuesday, was there either a performance or is someone winning a game that surprised you guys at all?
Well, one storyline that I wanted, you can go first.
You have a storyline, so I'm just interested.
So one storyline I want to talk about is, the Chicago Bulls lost by 20 points last night to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that was a weird one. Right away, they called it players only meeting, which, is kind of crazy considering this is a team, who competed in the play-in last year. You remember they actually were beating the Miami Heat in that play-in game before the Heat went on that run. But, already one game in having the players only meeting, what could that be about?
I mean, I have no idea. It's a weird situation. I'm glad you brought that up. I completely forgot about it. But real quick, my game performance, I'm going with both from last night. And that was with the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the reason I bring up this game is I was scrolling through the box scores just now, and one stat caught my eye right away. Cam Thomas, 36 points. I mean, I don't really remember Cam Thomas very well, but 36 in their first game of the year. I think that's something. I mean, they lost by 1. Max Strus had 27 points. Donovan Mitchell, I believe, also had 27 points. The Cavs played a very solid game against the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, the Cavs only won by 1 against the Brooklyn Nets. Maybe the Nets are turning a corner. They're going to be more competitive, but there's some interesting. I mean, the one thing that sucked, I wanted to see Amani Bates play. I'm interested to see I talked about him last week a little bit. I'm interested to see the role that he has, because I think he's going to be like one of a good player who not this year, but next year really grows and could be like a most improved player candidate in the future. I think he's very talented. At one point, I think a couple of years ago, looking at last year's draft class, he was going to be the number 2 overall pick after Wembanyama, or I believe that's what it was. But you had good performances from Max Strus. Isaiah Okoro had 18. Evan Mobley had a slow game. He only had 10 points on 5 of 11. And then you had, of course, the performances from Donovan Mitchell. Slow game, though, from Darius Garland. Only 15 points on 6 of 12, including 1 for 5 from 3. Karis LeVert had 17 shots, only made 4. He had, I think, 11 points with a bad plus minus. So, I mean, a little bit of concerns to Cleveland, but I'm going to go with my biggest performance. I'll go with Team Cleveland looking pretty solid as a group, but Cam Thomas, 36. Jeez. Wait, Chris, do you have a performance?
The Indiana Pacers dropped 143 points, while the Washington Wizards dropped 120. I mean, this is an extremely high-scoring game. Really good performances from the Indiana Pacers. Had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players dropping double-digit points, with 2 of them dropping
That's insane.
20. Right? I mean, it's unbelievable performance there. The Magic that pounded the Rockets yesterday. I mean, it's the Magic, right? They've been a team that's trying to rebuild for a while now, right? We all know Paolo Banchero. Cole Anthony had a good game. They're dropping 20. I believe, Franz Wagner also did
Franz
pretty
Wagner,
well.
I love him.
Yeah, I mean, good team, good performances. Yeah, overall, I mean, it was a really good day of really good night of basketball yesterday, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But really, I think the 2 games that were on ESPN, I really thought the Knicks, Celtics, and obviously the Spurs, I think those were probably the 2 that jumped out the most.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a little biased because they're the 2 teams that we like, but I thought those were 2 really good games.
Yeah, by the way, quick note on the Pacers. They just signed Rick Carlisle, their head coach, to an extension. I believe that was today or yesterday. I don't really remember. I just look at through my headlines here. I'm like, Rick Carlisle extended by the Pacers. So they have a coach long term. Hopefully they can piece everything together. Colin, what was your game?
I mean, obviously, I was really interested by the Chicago storyline as well. I mean, we saw both Zach LaVine, Kobe White struggled. I mean, Zach LaVine ended up going 4 for 16. Kobe White went 4 for 14. And look, Chicago has been a team that for a while we've heard a lot about them being in trade discussions. We've heard about Zach LaVine possibly getting moved, DeMar DeRozan being moved, Nikola Vucevic even as well. I mean, I think that we see if Chicago is kind of staying on a similar pace as to being, kind of a team that's just fighting for a playing spot, I think we could see them being sellers at the deadline. You guys were talking about the Pacers game. Great performance by the Pacers. People forget a lot about the fact that this team was fighting for a playoff spot before they had a rough second half of the season. They kind of fell off to a degree. So I think that Indiana will be pretty good this season, at least going forward. Obviously Washington, they're going to be pretty bad this year. I mean, they're kind of fully embracing the tank. Jordan Poole had a pretty rough start in his first game, but I think that Jordan Poole having the reins of this offense going forward for the rest of the season, I think we're going to see a lot of high scoring games because we saw that potential in Golden State. I'm looking forward to seeing Jordan Poole running the offense in Washington.
I agree. And we'll head quickly to our Thursday night football predictions. Tonight's game in the NFL is the Bills and the Bucks. An intriguing one because the Bills coming off their unfortunate loss to the New England Patriots this week in Tampa Bay. Actually, they just lost to the Atlanta Falcons by 3 points in a close battle with the Birds. So we'll quickly go into what Instagram said because, of course, every time on my Instagram we do a poll just because why not? Interested to see what you guys think. And a lot of people picked the Bills. 62% picked the Bills. So we'll start with each of you guys. We'll start with Chris today to change it up. What's your prediction for tonight's game?
It's tough, it shouldn't necessarily be tough, but it just with the way the Bills have played the past couple weeks, with the game against the Giants and then this loss to the Patriots, it's like, who are the Buffalo Bills, right? What is this team? That being said, the Buccaneers not playing well at all. I mean, lost 2 weeks ago to the Lions, only being able to muster 6 points. And then losing a close, low-scoring game to the Falcons last week. I mean, it hasn't been very good. But if the Buffalo Bills are going to play that way against the New York Giants, if they're going to lose to the New England Patriots, I mean, the Buccaneers, the Buccaneers definitely can win this game, and it is in Buffalo. But again, I just Buffalo has not played all that well recently, and I think. Maybe this is the opportunity. Maybe this is the chance. They definitely have the ability to do it. I'm not saying they don't, right? They can definitely win this football game, but I'm just gonna say that the pain does extend for a third week for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, pain. I mean, they won against the Giants, but it is questionable. I'm gonna go with the Buccaneers winning this one, 17-13.
All right, look, both teams are coming off pretty rough losses. We couldn't really get to talk about either of them, but obviously Buffalo losing to New England, that was a shocking game because we're talking about how bad New England looked for most of the season, yet they dropped 29 points, that game-winning drive. Mike Gesicki scoring the game-winning touchdown, and even Tampa Bay. I mean, listen, they had a rough loss against Atlanta. Listen, Atlanta tried to give this game to them as much as they possibly could. They faltered a lot near the 1-yard line, near the red zone, and they ended up pretty much giving Atlanta the division lead. Now, looking forward to this game. I think that Buffalo does take it. Listen, they're at home here. I think they're the better team. Yeah. But listen, both teams have struggled, but we're looking at a Tampa Bay offense that scored 6 points against the Detroit Lions and scored 13 points against the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think they're going to score a lot here. I think that Buffalo should reassert its dominance, get back on track. I'm going to say Buffalo wins this one by a score of 27-13.
Yeah, I like that score prediction as well. I'm also going with the Buffalo Bills. I think this is going to be a very similar result to not the big defeat like how they did with Vegas, but I'm saying like they're going to rebound like how they did after the Jets game. Tough loss against an AFC East opponent. They bounce back very well and go out and win against a decent team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who have kind of fallen off since the beginning of the season. I'm going to say a very similar scoreline to Colin. I'm going to go with 20-10. Big day for Josh Allen. That's my big prediction for this game. And on that note, that will be all from us here at Into the Stands. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. If you like what you see, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to WIUR to make sure you watch us every single week right here on Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. But for Colin and Chris, I'm Robbie Basil saying so long. We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye, everyone.